with LBC, the one difference with me and the other presenters is here it's not just journalists talking to politicians, or more likely journalists talking to journalists, which is most of what political media seems to be these days. This one is about you and about what you think and how you see things. And the story that really fascinates me started back in Theresa May's speech at the party conference, and yep, she came on to Dancing Queen, and some people thought it was cringeworthy and other people thought it was quite funny, but tell you what, it was clever, wasn't it? Because it got all over the front pages, and it made, for the first time I can think, our Prime Minister actually look a little bit human. So I think in terms of party management, that was clever. One of the parts of the speech that in many ways was the most interesting didn't really get noticed, and it was Theresa May talking about the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, about the front bench coming from a different tradition to much of what we've seen from Labour over the decades. And she was appealing over the heads of the front bench to the back benches and indirectly to what she sees as moderate, patriotic Labour voters all over the country. So let's listen to this segment of her speech at the party conference in Birmingham.
We all remember what the Labour Party used to be. We passionately disagreed with many of their policies. Every Labour government left unemployment higher than they found it. Every Labour government ran out of other people's money to spend. Every Labour government left the economy in a mess. But at least they had some basic qualities that everyone could respect. They were proud of our institutions. They were proud of our armed forces. They were proud of Britain. Today, when I look across at the opposition benches, I can still see that Labour Party, the heirs of Hugh Gaitskell and Barbara Castle, Dennis Healey and John Smith, but not on the front bench. Instead, their faces stare blankly out from the rows behind, while another party occupies prime position, the Jeremy Corbyn Party. The Jeremy Corbyn Party rejects the common values that once bridged our political divide. Just compare Jeremy Corbyn's behaviour to that of his predecessors. Would Neil Kinnock, who stood up to the hard left, have stood by while his own MPs faced deselection and needed police protection at their party conference? Would Jim Callaghan, who served in the Royal Navy, have asked the Russian government to confirm the findings of our own intelligence agencies? Would Clement Attlee, Churchill's trusted deputy during the Second World War, have told British Jews they didn't know the meaning of anti-Semitism? What has befallen Labour is a national tragedy. What has it come to when Jewish families today seriously discuss where they should go if Jeremy Corbyn becomes Prime Minister? When a leading Labour MP says his party is institutionally racist? When the leader of the Labour Party is happy to appear on Iranian state TV but attacks our free media here in Britain? That is what Jeremy Corbyn has done to the Labour Party. It is our duty in this Conservative Party to make sure he can never do it to our country. To do that, we need to be a party for the whole country. Because today, millions of people who've never supported our party in the past are appalled by what Jeremy Corbyn has done to Labour. They want to support a party that is decent, moderate and patriotic, one that puts the national interest first, delivers on the issues they care about, and is comfortable with modern Britain in all its diversity. And we must show everyone in this country that we are that party.
Now, whether you like Theresa May or not, you have to say that that was well written, well delivered, one or two little coughs, but nothing compared to last year's party conference speech. And it's perfectly clear what she's doing, isn't it? She's saying, look, the Labour Party has been taken over by a group of people who are very, very extreme, don't represent the patriotic traditions of old Labour, mentions of Clement Attlee and Dennis Healey and these kind of figures from the past. And she's saying, we, the Conservative Party, now are the party for you. And if you think about where she's taken Tory party policy, well, in a way, she's got a point. Because she backs all of this today up with an article in The Observer where she says an end of austerity is in sight. Again, quite a big pitch to Labour Party voters. She talks about building lots more houses. Well, actually, that's a pitch to everybody, but in many ways is seen that she's talking about more houses being at the affordable end of the market. And then she talks about managing markets. Now, in the old days, of course, the Conservatives let the free market do its stuff. The Labour Party wanted to nationalise everything. But here we have a Prime Minister, an interventionist Prime Minister, pursuing policies that in many ways you would think come much more from the Labour tradition than they do from the Tory tradition. Folks, she's pitching for the centre ground. She's doing pretty much what Tony Blair did in reverse back in the 1990s. Back in the 90s, Tony Blair said to Tory voters, nothing to fear from me. We're not going to put your taxes up. We're not an extreme party. And she's now doing this from the other side of politics. Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell responded this morning to Theresa May's pitch.
Well, it looks as though she's making a pitch for Labour support because she's got so little support in her own party. If you read the stories this morning, there are a group of Conservative MPs who are threatening to, well, have a coup and then not vote for her own budget. They're falling apart. So it's no wonder she's desperately looking for support, fairly cynically, from anywhere. No, I'm not worried at all. Look.
So, are Mrs May's Conservatives becoming the new centre party? And if you think, do you know something? I don't even recognise them as a Conservative party. Effectively, they are becoming a centre party. Not even sure as a Conservative I can vote for them again. Call 0345 6060 973. But maybe you say, do you know what? I'm a Labour voter. My family have always been Labour. But actually, I do find Corbyn very extreme. And if the Conservative Party are now to move into the centre ground, I don't know. Maybe I could think about supporting them, in which case text to 84850. Or do you think, and I'm picking up shades of what John McDonnell just said, is she doing all of this because she knows we are very close to a Brexit deal that is going to enrage Tory Brexit voters, and she feels she's got to go for Labour support in the House of Commons to get the vital votes through and in the country to win next time round? Is she on the verge of really alienating Eurosceptic centre-right Tory voters? If that's how you feel, please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course Facebookers. You can watch us there and you can comment too. So we are, as I say, 10 days away from this major negotiation. She could be in real trouble with people who want a clean Brexit. Phil, who is new to the show, is calling from Stafford, is my first caller of the morning. Hi Phil, how are you?
Not too bad, thank you.
Good. So what do you make of is Mrs May now saying the Tories are the centre party?
She may well be. She can say what she likes. But for me, I don't believe that Theresa May really exists. I think she's a mouthpiece for the right-wing press. And for her to come in and say that she is going towards the centre is ridiculous.
Is it?
You may not. The morning after the general election, or before the general election, when the Daily Mail referred to people who didn't vote Brexit as traitors, as enemies of the people.
No, Phil, hang on, Phil. The Daily Mail did run some pretty strident headlines over that period, but they did.
You call them strident,
but they did not. Hang on, and okay, fine. For many, they were offensive. I'll go with you on that. What the Daily Mail did not do was say that people who didn't vote for Brexit were enemies of the state.
I thought the implication was clearly there.
Well, I did not. But anyway, the Daily Mail backed Theresa May above everybody. They were her main supporters. But do you honestly, Phil, think Theresa May can be classified as being right-wing?
Yes, I do.
Intervening in the economy, as Home Secretary, a remarkably liberal immigration policy with huge numbers coming to the country. How's she right-wing?
She's right-wing because her Brexit policy is right-wing.
Oh, is Brexit right-wing, Phil?
She's not as right-wing as you are.
Is Brexit right-wing, Phil?
Yes.
Really? So there are 5 million people who voted Brexit, who then the following year voted for the most left-wing leader the Labour Party's had in its history. Do you think those 5 million Labour voters are somehow right-wing?
Those people were not given a choice. They were disenfranchised like me. I believe quite clearly that the Brexit policy that she's pursuing is right-wing, yes.
Good Lord. Well, Phil, you're the first person I've heard say that, because actually the Brexit policy she's pursuing may well finish up keeping us in the customs union. Hey, we all look at things differently. My view is Theresa May has moved very much to the left. The space has been created by Labour. The Labour leadership have gone really way out to the left. I think she's creating a new centre party. Yes, one that accepts we're leaving the European Union, but I suspect leaving it in a very, very soft way. Is she creating the new centre party? Looks to me like it's a modern form of Blairism. That's what she's trying to do. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here at LBC, and it is 10:15. Much to talk about this Sunday morning, including the caller Nick Ferrari received on Friday from a 15-year-old who said he was a UKIP supporter at school, only to find himself in detention for doing so. And, of course, dramatic events overnight in America, where President Trump's nominee for the Supreme Court has got through, and he could be there as a Conservative judge for the next 30 years. But what fascinates me this morning is the direction Mrs May is taking the Conservative Party in. She is making a big pitch to Labour voters that accept Brexit's going to happen. Tony says to me by text, May is going after Brexiteer Labour. Smart. In many ways, it could be smart. But what's she doing at the same time? When she firstly starts to go for a very soft Brexit, secondly, talks about intervening in the economy, managing markets, does nothing for anyone that thinks the tax burden needs to come down. I mean, are you a Conservative out there who thinks that under Mrs May, following the conference speech in this article today, that actually the Conservative Party, as we know it, is effectively dead? She's setting up a new centre party. Or are you a Labour voter who thinks, do you know what, actually, I might just be tempted by this? Blair is calling from Camberley. Good morning, Blair.
Good morning, Nigel. I would just like to say, in my opinion, Theresa May's setting rat traps for the rats that will leave the Labour Party because they're not getting their own way. The Labour Party was formed with a manifesto, a bloodless revolution. Was to change the establishment. Instead of that, they joined the establishment. They became lords and ladies. They're not doing the job. Jeremy Corbyn is only implementing the way the Labour Party was meant to be run in the first place. And most of the people in it shouldn't be in it. Or these ones, these wets, as I call them. You're either going to do something or no. Do something. Talking about it's not much good.
Is there one difference, Blair, here? I mean, there is one thing that she said in that conference speech that I thought did have some validity. Because she talked about Attlee and Barbara Castle, and she could have mentioned Tony Benn if she'd wanted to, Dennis Healey. The one thing about all of those figures, they were absolute fierce patriots, weren't they? Great believers in the country. And Blair, isn't it interesting that with Jeremy Corbyn as leader, we don't see the Union Jack being waved at the Labour Party conference. We see the Palestinian flag. And there is a feeling, a perception, that this lot running Labour now are not particularly patriotic.
Well, I think the opposite. I think they've been very patriotic because they're going to help the working people, like the SNP are doing in Scotland. They're all for the people. Do they believe in the country, Blair? I mean, you know, when you have a leader of the opposition who refuses to sing the national anthem, doesn't give a very patriotic message, does it? No, but Theresa May never mentioned in her speech about taxing these companies that are avoiding their tax or these rich overseas loopholes. Not a word about that. They keep talking about it, but they never do it. Well, but equally, Blair, Labour didn't out about it either, did they? That's correct. I quite agree with you. You know. All right, so do you think Mrs May's pitch to these Labour voters will work or not? I think it'll work to a point, yes, I do. Aye.
So in that way, it's quite smart politics from her perspective.
Well, I suppose it is, really, yes. Aye.
OK, all right, Blair, thank you. Well, Blair looking at it very much from a Labour point of view, and Blair thinking it's quite smart. And I think, in some ways, if you're aiming for that market, and if you need to get Labour MPs representing big Brexiteer constituencies, if you've got to get their vote to get some kind of legislation through the Commons to back a deal that could be done very soon, then maybe it's pretty smart too. And the prospect of that deal, I think, well, I've been saying for days, I think it's almost been done already. You know, we have Donald Tusk telling us 3 days ago that an agreement was possible by the end of 2018, and just yesterday, Jean-Claude Juncker speaking to Austrian newspapers saying, I have reason to think that the rapprochement potential between both sides has increased in recent days. So it's a marked contrast, isn't it, to Salzburg, where she was left on her own, Mrs May, treated pretty badly by Donald Tusk. They're now saying very nice things. The big confusion, of course, is Donald Tusk again repeated that they'd be happy to do a Canada Plus deal. The Prime Minister is not. We may discuss that a bit later on this morning. So with a deal in the offing, Mrs May knows she's going to find it very difficult to get Jacob Rees-Mogg's European Research Group to vote for her in the House of Commons. In fact, there are one or two of them this morning threatening, as John McDonnell hinted at, to block the Conservatives' own budget if they don't get a clean Brexit. So maybe she needs that electoral support in the House of Commons, and I can see that. But what does it mean in the country? Are you a Conservative out there who doesn't recognise this party to be Conservative at all? I wonder if UKIP was 15 to 20% in the polls, whether she'd be able to do this. And I think the answer to that is no. I think UKIP being pretty weak at the moment makes it much easier for her to tack towards the centre ground. That's my view. Tell me I'm right, tell me I'm wrong. 0345 6060 973. Daniel is calling from Childs Hill. Good morning, Daniel.
Morning, Nigel. I just had to call you when I heard you say that, do you feel that you don't recognise this Conservative Party as a Conservative government?
Yeah.
And that is absolutely me. Nigel. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
I feel totally and utterly betrayed by weak and wobbly May and spreadsheet Phil Hammond. This Conservative government under May, they came in on a pitch of ring-fencing foreign aid, dropping the pledge not to raise income tax, VAT, and several other taxes.
Yep.
I mean, Nigel, I just thought, what on earth are they doing? Theresa May has gone absolutely mad. This strategy of trying to pitch for the centre ground, trying to pitch for Labour, is stupid. And I'll tell you why. It's illogical. So many Labour voters, I would say the majority of Labour voters, are appalled at what the Conservatives have done in the last 8 years with the frontline emergency services cuts, their savage attitude towards disabled people. And at the same time, the Conservative voters, the doctors, the dentists, the accountants, the small business owners who are the backbone of the country, the people, the strivers, as the Conservatives call them, feel totally and utterly betrayed by them. So May is alienating both Labour and Conservative voters.
No, that's interesting. And also, Daniel, worth a mention, particularly with it being a Sunday, that on social issues, you know, her government this week have announced that civil partnerships will now be available to heterosexual couples as well. And there may be many conservative, traditional Christians out there who would say, actually, on social issues, she's miles away from what you would expect from a Conservative.
Absolutely, Nigel. She is. And all you have to do, and this is the problem, I mean, you're very in touch with the people, but this government aren't. All you have to do is go out onto the street and talk to people, real people. You talk to people, and this is exactly what they say. The Conservatives are dressing, it's all window dressing. The Conservatives think they're trying to be clever by hoodwinking people. They're not. We're not stupid. The electorate are not stupid. People know exactly what the Conservatives are. And if Theresa May thinks she's going to gain even 10 or 11 votes by coming out with this so-called middle ground and what she's doing is effectively stealing Labour's policy.
So if Daniel, between now and Christmas, there is a big division in the House of Commons over the deal that she's done in Brussels, which may or may not see her stay in the customs union, I suspect it probably will, and if she wins that vote because she gets sufficient numbers of Labour MPs to go against their own party line, how would you then feel when the next election comes in terms of where your vote goes?
Well, that's a very good question. Do you mean a general election?
Yeah.
Well, Nigel, do you know what? It's that old phrase, politically homeless. I feel totally politically homeless, and in a way, I wish that UKIP had expanded, more policies. I wish UKIP. This country needs a common sense party of low taxes, of strong law and order, of supporting frontline emergency services, of stopping HS2, of spending our taxes properly, and we just don't have that, Nigel. And
I think, Daniel, when UKIP got 4 million votes in the general election in 2015, there was a pretty full manifesto, but I know that's a long, long time ago. Daniel, do you think that people like you, who say they feel politically homeless, and I think there's quite a lot of you actually, would you trust a new party that came along and was to the right of Mrs May's Conservatives?
Absolutely, 100%. Nigel, if a party came along saying, we are going to do what politicians haven't done for a long time, which is to cut taxes, increase revenue, support local businesses, support the businesses that keep the
what
UK...
What about, Daniel, what about immigration? Isn't that quite important to voters?
It is, but Nigel, I take the view, and I think most people who think about it rationally, is that the UK needs controlled immigration. And I think actually the way that you talked about immigration was actually very sensible. You said we need skilled people, and let's have a point system. Let's talk about this properly. And the UK needs immigration, and we need immigrants.
But I think, you see, Daniel,
built on immigrants.
You see, I think that this is the one issue since the referendum that none of them want to talk about at all, and yet it's still a huge issue out there amongst voters in this country. And the thing about a point system, of course, is not only do you work out what type of people you want, but you're also in control of the numbers as well. And I think a party that put to the country that net migration running still at 250,000 a year is unsustainable, might pick up an awful lot of votes from both sides of the divide. Daniel, thank you very much indeed for your call. Cameron turned the Tory party into New Blue Labour. May is carrying on with the project. Well, quite a lot of people would think that. May's strategy has been to pinch the ground of the opposition. First UKIP and now Labour. It's because she doesn't have any vision of her own. James says, May isn't a Tory! Exclamation mark on Facebook. She doesn't represent me or other traditional Conservatives. James, I can only agree. This is not traditional conservatism on an economic level, on a social level, or a political level, but she's kind of in the last week said, we don't care about that. We are a party that wants to intervene in the economy. We are a party that actually, what she's really saying is, we need your votes on the backbenches in Labour. Otherwise, I can't get my EU deal through. And that EU deal could be very, very close. You're listening to a Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 10:30. And is Mrs May now turning the Tories into the centre party? And are you, as a traditional Conservative, now effectively homeless under her leadership? She's pitching to Labour MPs on the backbenches to help support her in that final vote on the European Union. And she's pitching in the country saying, austerity's over, we'll intervene in the markets, we'll build loads of houses, and Jeremy Corbyn is way, way out on the left. Is this strategy going to work with Labour voters? Or is she likely to lose as many traditional Conservatives as she picks up Labour supporters? Before that, last night saw the end of a really vicious political battle that has been taking place in America. It is, of course, the Supreme Court nomination of Brett Kavanaugh by Donald Trump, and we've seen protests, we've seen hearings, we saw an accusation come from 36 years ago that he behaved very badly whilst a college student towards a woman, and she came and gave testimony. There's been an FBI investigation into all of this, and it's all divided very much down party lines. The Democrats think he's unfit, the Republicans think that he is fit, but it was always going to be an absolutely knife-edge vote, and by 50 votes to 48, Brett Kavanaugh is now a member of the US Supreme Court, and he's 53 years old. He's likely to be there, for 30, 40 years. Who knows how long he'll live. It is a big win for Donald Trump, because now there is a Conservative majority on that Supreme Court. And of course, ultimately, they rule on absolutely everything. Here was Trump speaking last night at a rally in Kansas.
I want to thank our incredible Republican senators for refusing to back down in the face of the Democrats' shameless campaign of political and personal destruction. Since the moment Brett Kavanaugh and you remember this, we made an announcement, and since right from the moment we announced, radical Democrats launched a disgraceful campaign to resist, obstruct, delay, demolish, and destroy right from the beginning.
It's a classic Trump rally. He is over the moon with this. And, of course, in 4 weeks' time, we'll be sitting here discussing what has happened in the US midterm elections. Nobody can tell me they know what the impact of this row has been. Does it strengthen Trump supporters who think that the attacks against Kavanaugh, the accusations were made without evidence, just one person's word against another? Do people think it was part of a vicious, unfair, horrible political campaign that motivates them more strongly to go out and vote Republican in the midterms? Or are there going to be voters, and in particular female voters, who are horrified by the attitude, as they see it, of the Republican Party towards the way women not necessarily are treated today, but were treated particularly in the past, and the way that we deal with that? You'll read commentators telling you Trump's going to win from this, Trump's going to lose from this. I, at the moment, don't really have a view. I don't know. On the numbers, and with history, probably Trump will hold the Senate but lose the lower House of Representatives. But all of that in 4 weeks' time. Back to our key debate today. But with just one more little thing to say, though. At the end of that vicious battle, there was a nice human moment. Let's reflect on it. Why was it 50-48 when there are 100 senators? Well, 2 were missing. And one faced a terrible dilemma yesterday. His name is Steve Daines. I know him. He is a genuinely nice fella. And he is a senator, Republican senator from Montana. Sometimes, your role in public life conflicts with normal life, and in particular with family life. And poor old Steve Daines must have been going through an agonising few days. Why? Because yesterday his daughter was getting married, and he wanted to be there to lead her down the aisle, as you can imagine any father in that position would be. So Daines having a terrible dilemma. Well, fortunately, Lisa Murkowski, who is a Republican senator from Alaska, she had decided that she was going to vote against the Republican nominee. And so what happened is Daines went to the wedding, and Lisa Murkowski, while she was there on Capitol Hill, abstained, therefore not putting a vote on the other side. So I just thought, through all the bitterness, the horrendous things that have been said on both sides, that's quite a nice end to the story. At least Senator Daines got to go to his daughter's wedding, which I think is rather a good thing. So Mrs May, pitching for the centre, sounding like very similar to Tony Blair was 25 years ago, when Blair was saying, nothing to be scared of, Conservatives, come on in, the water's lovely, and she's doing exactly that now to Labour voters. But at what price to her own support? Michael is calling from Dartford. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning to you. Good morning to you, Nigel. Lovely to talk to you again.
Thank you.
I'm caller at LBC and arch Brexiteer.
Right.
It appears that the Prime Minister continues to be hell-bent on her Chequers deal, and I don't know what it is in her, what her problem is. She's had it slapped back in her face at Salzburg. Her ministers are resigning over it. Backbenchers are up in arms about it. Grassroots hate it. Mm-hmm. And her main reason, as she says, for Chequers is it resolves Northern Ireland. Well, surely a Canada-type deal plus is on offer to the UK. It has always been.
Yep.
It's tariff-free, it's goods-free, and it's plus negotiated services.
Well, here's the bizarre thing, Michael. Firstly, on Chequers, she did not mention Chequers in her speech.
She did not.
A point that Donald Tusk noticed and picked up on. And what will happen, Michael, and this is my view, what will happen is Chequers, as such, will get chucked. She'll chuck Chequers. The European Union will throw down their objections and will head towards something that I'm now going to call Chequers minus. What she agrees with, Michael, will be even worse than Chequers, in my view, but it won't be called Chequers. Canada Plus is fascinating. So, call it whatever you like. But I've been told for 20 years, Michael, as an MEP, by everybody from Commissioner Neil Kinnock to Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, the former President of France, that if the UK wants to leave political union and have a free trade deal instead, that would be on offer. The bizarre thing is, ever since the Florence speech, the Prime Minister hasn't wanted that. She doesn't want us to cut all political ties and have a simple trade deal. She wants a close, ongoing relationship. So when, on Thursday, lunchtime, we saw this remarkable tweet from Donald Tusk, who'd been the villain of the peace, of course, at Salzburg, from our perspective. And Tusk says, we want Canada plus, plus, plus. And the people who objected to it were the British government, saying it would make it impossible in Northern Ireland. And I cannot, for the life of me, see how it makes Northern Ireland impossible, given that, number one, there would be no tariffs to collect, that number two, in terms of product differentials and laws, well, right now, we are on exactly the same rule book as everybody else. And yet it wasn't the EU, it wasn't even the Irish government. It was, bizarrely, it was Downing Street using the argument about Northern Ireland to knock back the Canada deal.
Nigel, a question to you. I did what you asked us to do, a call to arms from the Birmingham rally, and to go meet with your MPs. I did that yesterday. I met with a lovely lady who's in the Labour Party, and I sat her down with my bullet points about a Canada-type deal, and she loved it. And I said, well, what's the Labour Party's position on it? She said, well, actually, at the moment, we're all pretty quiet because we're waiting to hear what they're going to be saying on Tuesday. It occurs to me, coming back to the Theresa May thing on the Conservative Party, that she's doing her best to try to sell Chequers, whereas nobody wants it, and she's trying to go to those Brexiteers in the Labour Party who are, somewhat blind to the Canada deal. If this Canada deal is sold correctly with the right mouthpiece, as you are doing and other people are doing, everybody in the country will love it. It addresses all the questions.
Michael, not everybody would love it, but a huge number would love it. A substantial number would be happy with it, and they would way outweigh those that want to remain. It'd be a win-win, but she won't do it, Michael, and I'm absolutely astonished by that. Let me ask you, Michael, you picked up the call to arms. Had you ever been and met an MP and lobbied them before?
Never, sir. It's my first time. And I'd never been to a bookies before, and in 2016 I went and bet on Brexit, and by God I won. And I've never stepped foot in one of these offices before. But I'm only committed to politics because of you, Mr. Dear Nigel Farage.
Well, thank you, Michael. And I must say, I think what Michael has done there, he's been and lobbied his MP. And actually, it is very, very important that you understand, everybody out there, your MPs are not completely separate people living on their own islands. They work for you. So if you want to go and see them and talk about Brexit or anything else, you should do so. Michael, I thank you very much indeed for your call. You're listening to a Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's 10:45. Mrs May's heading for the centre ground. If you're a Conservative, do you feel alienated? If you're Labour, are you tempted by what she's trying to do? Behind all of it, folks, is she needs to get a vote through the House of Commons on whatever Brexit deal she strikes. She is likely to need Labour MPs in order to do that. But first, Sir Bob Geldof is, of course, one of my least favourite people in the world. After the Battle of the Thames, as it was known, back during the referendum, at which Sir Bob was busily, apart from abusing me, which, hey, no one gives a damn about that, but busy telling the British fishing industry what a great deal they had from the European Union. I don't think they bought into it. But Sir Bob, never one to go away, is Ramona in chief, and he's now telling us that with a no-deal Brexit, we could have a Britain without music. It's extraordinary. Let's hear him.
It's twofold. One is the income it generates for this country, 94 billion, bringing into the country. Contrast that with the NHS total spend of 115 billion, almost the same. This will be critically damaged. The second reason is cultural. The voice of Britain, the genuine global voice, is our music. It has been since the Beatles, the greatest cultural influencers of the 20th century. No one knows quite why this tiny island produces such vast reservoirs of talent, but we do know that the entire planet dances, eats, sleeps, and plays hard to our noise. That's the sound of genuine global Britain, and that has been endangered by a recklessness which is existential.
Well, this is just political, isn't it?
Self-damaging.
I mean, this is just political, isn't it? I mean, what's this got to do with the music industry, Sir Bob Geldof? Now, he's clearly taken a lot of people in with this, and some people I rather like. I mean, Paul Gambaccini was on with Andrew Castle about an hour ago. Like Paul Gambaccini, like listening to his stuff. But, Paul, why are you being taken in by this? When Sir Bob tells you that through music, Britain has a truly global voice, he's absolutely right. So why would you obsess about 7% of the world's population and 15% of the world's economy? There's a great big world outside of Europe, and actually, in many ways, Brexit is saying no to a backwards form of undemocratic government in Brussels and yes to a bigger, wider and exciting world. Yeah, I know there's all sorts of EU legislation that affects, royalties, etc. And once we leave the European Union, on day one, even with a no deal, that stuff will all be written into British law and we can work out over time how we can make it even better. I even heard Paul Gambaccini saying there could be, no insulin coming into the country with a no-deal Brexit. Well, we do actually manufacture some of it here. And no one's suggesting, because you have a no-deal Brexit, that pharmaceutical companies in Germany, or certainly motor manufacturers in Germany, won't want to go on selling their products here. It is hysterical scare stories like this that Sir Bob Geldof is putting out that I think is actually hardening the view of those that voted Brexit or those who respect the result of Brexit. I'm off to Brisbane in Australia. Well, I was a few weeks ago, actually. But Luke is calling from there and a new caller to the show. Good evening, Luke.
Good morning, Nigel.
Hello.
Hi, mate. Listen, just listening to what you're saying about Prime Minister May heading to the centre. Well,
yes.
Not that long ago, our former Prime Minister Turnbull was pretty much the same. He was very centre side of politics, and eventually the troops rebelled, and he's gone. And that was only a few weeks ago.
That's right. In fact, it happened the week before I got to Australia. I thought I was leaving a country, Luke, in terrible political turmoil and going somewhere a bit calmer. But I got to Australia and found that the Prime Minister had been knifed, and that actually the debate that is going on within conservatism in Australia, not dissimilar to many of the debates happening here.
I see a trend, absolutely. And should Miss May continue on that path, you've got others within the Conservatives who will, I'm sure they're thinking of the same thing. And I reckon Boris Johnson is running out of fingernails at the moment. He's biting them in anticipation. He's just waiting for that excuse. And it's been good fun watching it.
Now, Tony Abbott, who, of course, was the Prime Minister before Malcolm Turnbull, and who had very conservative views on a big range of issues, would call himself a traditional conservative. Do you see him coming back as Prime Minister at some point in the future? Or, where does... You've had a Prime Minister in the shape of Turnbull, former Goldman Sachs employee, I'm sure that's a coincidence, dragging you towards the globalist centre, signing Australia up to the United Nations Compact on Migration, etc. But where does, having gone through the trauma of losing a Prime Minister, do it, where does the Australian Conservatives go now?
As far as Abbott returning, I don't think that would happen for some time because they see him as a disruptor. However, in saying that, he stands by his convictions. And this is what our politics lacks. Our politics is a little bit monotone. Everyone's looking at the opinion polls and chopping and changing their opinions depending on what the polls are saying, whereas Abbott was a bit more like... very successful Prime Minister Howard, where he would say, this is what I believe in,
yes,
and this is what it is. If you don't like it, tough.
We've got a fellow called Jacob Rees-Mogg who does much the same thing. Stands up and says, this is what I believe in, whether you like it or not, and I'm not going to budge. So, Luke, you're basically saying, from Australia, major warning to the Conservatives, go towards the centre, and she could finish up like Malcolm Turnbull.
I believe so.
Smashing.
And one further note, for all the Brits out there who are hesitant in leaving the EU, it is a brilliant world out there. Go and do deals with whoever you want. Come and join us. Have some fun.
Absolutely.
It's like a relationship. Being in the EU is like being in a relationship with friends who don't want to say nasty thing about everybody else, but really don't know what's going on. And then once you do break free, you'll see, hang on, there's a huge wide world out there where you can control your own
and
business.
Luke will say, why didn't we do it years before? Thank you. In response to that Sir Bob Geldof clip, I get this. We were not part of the European Union when the Beatles and Liverpool sound was being listened to. I can't imagine how we managed before we were governed by people like Mr Juncker. Really quite extraordinary. Nigel, it would be great without Geldof's music. Brexit would surely be more likely to foster more world music, says Phil in Harpenden. Phil, I do not understand the argument Geldof is trying to make. And I'm honestly, and anyone that listens to me regularly will know, if I hear somebody making a counter-argument, whether I agree with it or not, I will acknowledge when people make sound arguments. I don't believe Mr Geldof did. Can you believe the next caller, as another new caller to the show, is also calling from Brisbane in Australia? And it's Carlo. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you going?
I'm going all right. To get two calls back to back from Brisbane is quite extraordinary.
Two for the price of one.
Well, I know. There we are. Knocked down. Absolutely. Well, there are good free market principle there, you see. But
That's exactly right.
But Mrs May's moving away from free markets. She's telling people that we'll intervene, etc. She's pitching for Labour MPs. She's pitching the Conservatives into the centre. Is it going to work?
Well, you say the centre, but I think she's leaning left, personally.
Okay.
Just from what I see, I mean, I'm on the other side of the world, but, from what I see on programs, what I read on the net, and what I see her do and say, to me, that she's leaning left. I mean, Boris can't open his mouth without her telling him to apologise for everything he says. I mean...
and they're investigating him, Carlo.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
And it amazes me, just from here, watching what's going on, it just seems like she's sabotaging Brexit. And I know that might sound harsh, but to me, if I had a person like yourself available to help in the negotiations, who knows what they're doing, and you don't use this person for the good of the country, I don't understand I know she's not your best friend and all that, but it's not. You got to put that personal stuff aside to help to do what's best for the country. She's not doing that.
Well, she certainly won't work with me in any way at all. And I think, Carlo, I could have been.
I understand that.
And I could have been useful. I could have been useful in some way, and I would have wanted to be useful in some way. But hey, she wasn't going to do that. And Carlo, tell me something. Does Corbyn's, when she says that Corbyn's gone so far left that traditional Labour people should now feel alienated, she's got half a point with that, hasn't she?
Yeah, he's left. He's
left. He's left. She's moved into the centre. Carlo, thank you for your call. Listen, I'm going to keep this going because lots and lots and lots of people, not just from Australia, who are ringing in this morning and want to be on. And it is, a big, big debate, isn't it? Mrs May doing it at the conference, front page today of The Observer, and she's taking the party in a very, very different direction to that many traditional Conservatives would believe in. She's made this direct appeal to Labour voters. She's saying, if you're disenchanted with Jeremy Corbyn as leader, come to us. Look at my government afresh. You will find a decent, moderate and patriotic programme worthy of support. Are Mrs May's is she forming the new centre party? And if you think, yep, absolutely, I do not recognise this at all, I'd be interested to see if UKIP got stronger, and we'll talk a bit about UKIP in the next hour. Call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you're Labour, and you think, maybe I will vote for her. Maybe this is a new Tory party. Text to 84850, and text me anything you like, tweet anything you like, if it's sane, using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course, watch and comment on Facebook. We're going to be back in a few seconds. Is Mrs May trying to reshape British politics? She makes a big pitch at the Tory party conference. She backs it up today with an article in The Observer. This is not a short-term sort of tactical move. This is a big strategic move. The Conservative Party are going for Labour votes. They'll need them in the House of Commons to get a very soft Brexit deal through, and she feels she'll need them in the country. And I think one of the reasons is she knows that quite a lot of Tory Brexiteers are going to be enraged by what she's done. She'll know quite a lot of evangelical Tory supporters will be very upset that They changing the rules, moving the boundaries once again so that civil partnerships can be open to heterosexual couples. There'll be people that are out there saying, we're traditional conservatives, they're devaluing marriage. That's what many people will say. They'll look at those who believe essentially in free markets, will look at an interventionist, a Conservative Prime Minister, talking much more like an old Labour Prime Minister might have done on some areas of economic intervention. I wonder, what happens with this new positioning of May? What happens on the centre-right of British politics? Do we see a big resurgence for UKIP, or is UKIP now a brand name that's had its day? Could a new party emerge in politics? Or is the reason that May feels comfortable and Number 10 feel comfortable in moving to this position is they don't believe anything fresh will get set up. And they believe ultimately that all the Conservatives, such as those in the European Research Group, ultimately they will support the party, not vote against and not potentially break away. What does it mean for Labour? Well, if she was successful, if she did manage to eat in, particularly to that 5 million people who voted Corbyn and voted Brexit, it'd be seriously bad news for Labour as well. Thus far, John McDonnell said he's not taking it very seriously. David Blunkett has said it's a trap, and we as the Labour Party have to be careful of it. James is a new caller from Dorking. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Mr. Ross. How are you?
I am well. I'm really curious, because you see, David Cameron, when he became a Tory party leader, said that he wanted to detoxify the Tory party. It had been called the Nasty Party, ironically by Mrs May, of course. She branded it that. So he took the Tory party to a whole new place where he thought the Guardian newspaper might start to be a bit nicer about them, etc. And having dragged them into this centrist position, he failed to win a majority in the 2010 election. And yet Mrs May's doing the same thing.
I completely agree with you, because I personally think I can't represent the Conservative Party as my party anymore. Since the 2017 election, where the Tory Party actually won a majority election with the DUP, that means that we have not got a complete Tory party anymore.
So, James, are you a Tory? I just missed that bit. Are you a Tory party member?
I'm in Tory party student politics.
Right, fine. So you're part of a Conservative association?
Yes.
OK, now there was an article today in the Mail on Sunday that was suggesting that actually amongst young Tories, Theresa May is quite a popular figure. What's your perception of that?
I do not like her one bit. I disapprove of her stances, because personally for me, she's going from one side to the other, and keep on changing her ideas, like with the Chequers Agreement. Right,
so James, you're a young student Conservative activist. The party signals a big strategic shift to being in the centre and portraying itself in the centre. Where do you go from here? I mean, do you stick with a party whose direction you don't like, or do you think about breaking away and doing something else?
I'm thinking about breaking away, unfortunately. The Conservative Party just doesn't represent me anymore.
But where would you go, James?
Unfortunately, I disagree. I completely disagree with Mr Corbyn's stance. I disagree with the British National Party, but I don't know. There's not a party for me anymore, because I think I've been outcast by the Conservative Party with their constant changing opinions.
And and how strongly, James, do you feel about Brexit?
I think it can be good for the country if it's done correctly.
And is she doing it correctly?
Some of it, not so much. I believe that we should not give in to the EU stance, and we should set the rules out for our Brexit. We should agree on our Brexit, and not let the EU agree on our Brexit.
OK. Now, James, great call. Thank you. Sticking with young Tories, I've got a young Tory voter here called Max from Dartford. Good morning, Max.
Morning. I just wanted to say that I think she's been clever in the way that she's done it, because I don't like her at all, and I don't like the way the party's going, but I can't vote for Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes.
And I never could. So what else? And I wouldn't vote for anyone else, because it's almost like the same as the last election. A vote not for Conservative would be a vote for Labour, because that's the stance that everyone takes.
But could it be, Max, that there'll be disenchanted Tory voters like you who say, do you know what? It's 9 o'clock already. The polls close in an hour. It's raining. Oh, I left my umbrella in the office. Oh, well, I'll tell you what, let's not bother.
Yeah, I mean, political apathy is the big thing now, I think, in the 21st century. I think less and less people are involved in politics and they're not interested. And I think unless they go back to traditional Tory values, then the only thing I can see coming out of it is the ERG group with Rees-Mogg and a few other backers are creating a more right-wing party that should be sitting firmly on the right wing, not the far right, obviously, but where it should be in traditional values.
Which, in a way, didn't UKIP fill a bit of that space?
Yeah, no, and it did, and I voted definitely in the European elections, and I think actually in 2015, if I remember correctly, I did actually vote. I was one of the ones that voted for them, just as more of a thing for getting the referendum vote, more than
just to make sure it happened.
And I feel that UKIP has gone down that road. Unfortunately, the problem with UKIP is that it hasn't got the same structural capacity as Labour and Conservatives, obviously, and they haven't got the same amount of sort of public eye. You know, they've been around almost 100 years, and UKIP have been around about 25, 30 years. So it's just
Max,
difficult.
If there was if UKIP got some life, was seen to have got some life breathed back into it, or if there was a new centre-right party, could you vote for that? Yeah,
if I'm honest, just because of the way that UKIP has been portrayed, rightly or wrongly, by the media, I don't think that people would vote for that. But a brand new party on that same stance that UKIP have, I think could attract more votes, but you'd have to detract away from UKIP because you couldn't have them anymore just because of the way they've been portrayed, whether it's right or wrong. People, especially people that sit as a...
And how do you... And in terms of that perception, how do you see UKIP being portrayed? Because we're going to talk later on in the hour about the 15-year-old boy who was given detention for saying he'd vote for UKIP and discuss it. Where do you see the... I mean, are people looking at UKIP differently now to, say, a year or two ago?
Yeah, I think people, especially in professional roles, in the public sector, especially in professional roles, would be worried about the stigma or way they'd be judged by their peers had they vote for UKIP and then say they voted for UKIP. I think there's a stigma to it, not so much in terms of what they represent, because they represent nothing wrong, but it's a stigma attached to it, unfortunately. It's a stigma that's been classed as like a racist party for however many years, even though we all know it's not. But, however, a lot of people in the public don't look into politics. They just believe what they see on the front page.
And they've got their lives to live and don't want any aggro. Max, thank you so much indeed for your call. Sue says, maybe Theresa May should cross the floor and become the Labour leader. Well, I think she's always trying to do that anyway, in a funny sort of way. It's a bit late for the Conservatives to try to claim the centre ground. The damage is done. They will lose the election and Labour will ruin us for a generation under Mr Corbyn. It's about time those MPs from both sides stand up for the centre rather than standing idle. Well, Mrs May would argue that's what she's doing. You know, Mrs May will say she's trying around the centre ground to create a coalition that stops Mr Corbyn from becoming Prime Minister. That was, if you think about back to that speech that she gave during the week as she closed the Conservative conference, that's very much what she was saying. Now, we've had callers from Brisbane, Australia, new callers, but a regular caller is John from Formby. John, good morning.
Morning, Nigel.
So, she really is, I mean, she really is going for the centre, isn't she?
Yes. And I think there is an opportunity to do that because the loony Labour Party has lurched so far to the left. However, what the problem is the country is in a total mess. With failing schools, law and orders breaking down, nothing done about immigration, and a party that would tackle these issues, I think, would do extremely well, particularly in areas like the north of England, the Midlands, Wales, etc. I see so much disquiet on the internet that people are absolutely fed up.
Do you sense, John, there's more or less disquiet now than, say, before the referendum?
Oh, much more.
Much more.
Because obviously the Ramonas are completely unhappy. People who wanted Brexit feel betrayed. And the government's performance has got worse and worse and worse.
That's interesting. And the Ramonas, yeah, I mean, goodness me. Sir Bob Geldof's pretty depressed. There's going to be no more music, John. Did you realise that?
Oh, well, there hasn't been any music, as far as I'm concerned, since about 1979.
That's a personal opinion, obviously. So, John, if the Labour Party's gone to the left and the Conservative Party goes to the centre, and the Liberal Democrats are not particularly big or significant, it sounds to me like there's a whopping great load of room on the centre-right of British politics.
Absolutely, because some areas have just been abandoned. I think, effectively, Tony Blair is still the Prime Minister of this country. His body may be moulding in the grave, but his soul goes marching on.
Wow. It certainly seemed to with that speech in the Week in this article. So who fills the gap, John?
A revived UKIP or something completely new.
Yeah, I think that's the view of quite a lot of
certainly
people.
not the Liberals. I mean, what do they stand for?
Well, they stand for Remain, and of course the point is, you look at all these opinion polls, only about 20% of the country thinks we should remain on current terms, or even terms of deeper integration. Any political party that just pitches at 20% is never going to get more than 10% anyway. John, I thank you. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it is 11:15. So you're a moderate Labour voter. You're one of the 5 million that voted for Brexit. You look at a Labour Party that you might have supported for the whole of your life, accusations of anti-Semitism, photographs of Jeremy Corbyn with some highly unsuitable people, and you may be, in many ways, not too sure what to do. Does Mrs May, by saying on the economy and on social issues we are no longer a party you would associate with the word Conservative, and hey, look at your front bench, does that appeal work to you? Philip in Whiteleaf sends me a text and says, Nigel, Labour voters who voted Leave won't vote for Mrs May's Conservative Party. So Philip says it won't work. And it is interesting, you know, to get people, in many cases, switching, whatever the circumstances, from Labour to Tory, from Tory to Labour, if their families for generations have voted for one particular party, is a tough thing to do. I got a lot of, when I was leading UKIP, a lot of Labour people did vote for me. Well, look, you're all right, Nigel, I can vote for you, but I could never vote Conservative. I mean, even if the Conservatives were saying things that they agreed 1,000% with, culturally it was quite a difficult bridge to gap. Now, I don't know whether 4 or 5 years on that has changed. Let's go to Faduz, who's new to the show from Manor Park. Good morning.
Morning, Nigel. Thank you for taking my call.
Welcome.
I just want to make a point to not only you, to across the media now. People are banging on about centre ground, which doesn't exist. We need to look like some people are sleepwalking. If you look just across the Atlantic and look across the Europe, it's completely ridiculous nowadays to think about political centre ground. How come people just judging Corbyn before even giving him a chance? Look, if like people think about historical fact about Tories, Theresa couldn't be Prime Minister now because people just bringing about centre ground and left and those kind of Lib Dems. That's the reason Lib Dem disappearing. That's the reason why Trump is triumphing. And that's the reason why some far right are popping up in Europe. So now British politics got to be either you are left or right. There's no middle ground. It's not going to happen. So
all
either
right.
it's Corbyn or someone like you.
Well, Faduz, okay, I'm listening to what you're saying, but if you're the leader of the right-wing party in Britain, namely the Conservatives, and you are very happy to support a complete change of a status of marriage in this country, you want to intervene in the economy, quite difficult to continue to be the leader of a right-wing party, isn't it?
But that's exactly what Boris is trying to do. He's just trying to shape himself in a way that exactly he's taking the line from Trump's textbook. I don't blame for him for doing that because he knows, and whoever advising him, that's the way it is going. It's unfortunately people are talking about centre ground. People don't like it nowadays because it's either experiment completely going back in 70s with Corbyn. It might work because they must have learned lesson, or you can go completely right. And I think the right is going to be difficult now, given the fact the mess we are in now with Brexit and so forth. So I believe, it's difficult.
Let me ask you quickly. Mrs May is positioning herself and selling herself effectively as being the leader of a party at the centre. Do you think that will gain her Labour voters or not?
They will lose her big time because that's how she's trying to shape to be claiming and luring Labour votes. It's not going to work because you can't change, no matter how many times you wash the coal. It's not going to change the colour. So ultimately, it's got to be.
I like the
believe me,
analogy.
because this is not going to work in today's politics. You just look around the world. It's not only the UK. It's what's happening in Europe, what's happening in America.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. People want something authentic to vote for. I think that's the point you're making, and I like the point, and thank you. This show is very international in nature. We're now off to Tokyo to speak to JT. Good evening to you in Tokyo.
Hello, Nigel.
Hello
How
there.
are you?
I am well, thank you. So, this big strategic shift that Mrs. May is undertaking, does she gain more from Labour than she loses from traditional Conservatives, in your view?
Well, it's another example of the sort of chameleon-esque administrations that we've seen so far. I don't think she's going to gain many Labour voters, but I think it puts her at risk of losing Conservative voters.
Yes. So on balance, and we've got a difficult line, but on balance, do you think she's making an error in doing this?
It's not very smart. I think what voters want in a politician, in any country, is the 3 C's: competence, charisma, and consistency. And I will leave it up to British voters to decide which of those 3 boxes she can check by making this move.
Terrific. I like that. The 3 C's. Very good, JT. We'll get you back on when the line is better. The Bob Geldof clip and comments are exciting, lots of interest. Most of our music is aimed and influenced by America, I get. No, it all comes from the European Union, and if we leave Brexit, there'll be no more music. It'll be a disaster. Honestly. I mean, how people like Bob Geldof can think that saying things like that is credible, I just don't know. And no wonder we call them Ramonas, because that's what it sounds like. He doesn't look very happy with the world at all, I have to say. Mary is calling from Hemel Hempstead. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Nigel. Regarding Theresa May, she constantly, even through Brexit, has wanted to find the middle ground. And this is, again, finding the middle ground. She wants to please everybody, and she's pleasing nobody. I'm particularly angry with her because the way she devastated the police numbers when she was Home Secretary. And now she's reneged on she's told Sajid Javid that he's not to give them their 3% pay rise that they were promised. To me, that is going back, is traitorous, and it proves she can't be trusted. She put the block on her.
Mary, come on. You know, traitorous is a very strong word to use on a Sunday morning, isn't it?
Well, I'm afraid I do think she's a traitor. She's a traitor to her party. I was a Tory activist. She was a traitor to her party, traitor to her country. And I mean, the way she's decimated the police numbers and now isn't going to give them a 3% rise. I don't remember her refusing the 10% rise that the MPs got.
Mary, clearly you feel this very personally if you've been a Conservative activist and you can't stand the direction she's taking it in. Have you got anything nice you can say about the Prime Minister, Mary?
Nothing at all. Nothing at all. I don't trust the woman. I think she's deceitful, devious, and I think she's got her own agenda. What it is, I don't know. I think she's extremely cunning, and I don't like what I see.
That's very clear, Mary. It's interesting. One of the previous callers said that he felt the influence of Tony Blair over our national life was still very much there. And, back in 2005, when Cameron and Osborne took over the leadership of the Tory party, and they basically tried to make David Cameron as Prime Minister the heir to Blair. And if you remember, Tony Blair in the mid-90s talking about the third way, the middle ground, and it worked successfully for him. Do you think in some ways the Tory party still look up to Tony Blair as being the model that they need to follow?
Well, they wouldn't admit it at all, of course, but you know what has happened is they saw how he had a sweeping election. He won the election 3 times, and they think, right, we'll follow his principles and we may be able to do the same. But unfortunately, the world has moved on, and you know what they say, a week's a long time in politics. We've now got this Brexit situation, which Blair never had to handle it in any way.
Sure.
And I think they've lost it now, really. Well, I've joined UKIP.
Okay. Yeah. No. And that's...
And I'm just hoping that come March, if there's a leadership election, you'll go back and join it, and I'm sure you'll take everything by storm.
Well, Mary, thank you for that on a Sunday morning. Very good indeed. Thank you. Well, so, I mean, you have to say, folks, that there is a change, isn't there, in political debate in this country. I find it very difficult to believe that, 5 or 10 years ago, we would have had, and I'm making some sort of assumptions here, but we'd have had somebody like Mary from Hemel Hempstead coming on and using the sort of language she's just used. It just shows you passions are still running very, very high indeed. Don't worry, Nigel, May will be out soon and she'll be on Strictly Come Dancing next year. Gosh, now that would get an audience, I've got to tell you, that really, really would. Let's go to John, who's calling from Keighley in West Yorkshire. Morning, John.
Good morning, Nigel. Good to hear from you again.
So, she's putting it in the centre. Is she going to get, in places like Keighley, is she going to get thousands of Labour voters? Thousands of them, John. She's a genius.
Nigel, this is a wasteland.
Right, go on.
There's nothing. No, Keighley, the lads here, when they try to take that TV licence off them, that's their drink money for about 6 months. It really is bad, Keighley, honestly. It's a industrial desert.
So things are bad in Keighley, but hey, you've now got a Conservative, patriotic Prime Minister.
Oh, you're making me ill.
but John, that's how she's positioning herself, isn't she?
She's a blithering idiot, Nigel. She wants to do what Margaret Thatcher did.
Now, come on, you can't be an idiot and become Prime Minister, can you?
I think it's quite possible if you are.
Right.
It's not unknown, is it? but really, all the European Union want is that 40 billion quid.
Yeah.
And she's definitely give it to them. If she does that, I don't care where you vote, you've got to have rocks in your head. That's the one thing. She's going to sell us short. The silence of the lawyer fraternity has been deafening. She's done a deal.
So would Jeremy Corbyn do a better job for us as Prime Minister, in your view?
Oh, God, no. God help us. God in heaven, no.
John, you're having a tough morning, aren't you? I mean, you're sounding a bit like sort of Bob Geldof in your exasperation at what's going on. Well,
I can't stand him either.
I mean, they do open in half an hour, John. Maybe that's what you need. I don't know. But, yeah...
I've got to say something to you. John, can I just say something? Last time I spoke to you, Nigel, I prophesied that you could be in the Conservative Party, probably as an independent, and Boris would be Prime Minister. I forgot to mention you've both got an extremely powerful ally. The President.
Well, Donald Trump, of course, supports Theresa May, and we saw all of that on his recent visit. And if you want to believe that, you can believe anything. John, I thank you very much indeed. Sounded like the toast was burning in the background or something was going wrong there. And poor old John, very depressed about the whole thing. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 11:30. So Mrs May moves to the centre. She appeals to Labour voters, and one of the things she believes, just as Cameron believed when he took the party to the centre, that nothing to the right of the Conservative Party can ever hurt them or ever damage them. Their calculation, certainly in 2012, 13, 14, was that UKIP could never hurt them, and then UKIP did start to hurt them. In the end, ironically, by getting more Labour votes, it might have helped him. But this perception, I believe, is still alive and well today. They think that UKIP is weak. But are we having, folks, a proper, honest, open debate in this country, and respecting the fact that different people have different political points of view? Because on Friday morning, on The Breakfast Show, Nick Ferrari was really quite shocked, I think, when a caller said that his teenage son had been given a detention at school for telling a teacher he'd vote for UKIP. Paul in Lowson said 3 boys, including his 15-year-old, were issued the punishment following a classroom debate during the general election. Here he is, speaking with Nick on Friday morning.
Paul is in Loughton. Paul, what happened to your son? He got into trouble, is that right? Good morning.
Yeah, there was a few of them. It was during the last general election, and I was having a debate in his class about who you'd vote for. And one boy said he'd vote for UKIP, and the teacher said that all UKIP voters are racist. So my boy joined in and said, well, I'd vote for UKIP and I'm not racist. They're about controlling it, whatever.
Yeah.
And he was given detention, the 3 boys that said it. And when he came home and told me, I didn't believe him. I said, let me ring the school. And the head of the year said, when I talked about it to the teacher, came back and he couldn't apologise enough. He said she got angry because they said they'd vote for UKIP.
A teacher gave you... How old is your boy?
He was 15 at the time.
Oh, my God. So they're on the verge of becoming young men. They're a couple of years off from voting. They're having a conversation about in the general election. One boy says, I'd vote UKIP. Your teacher goes nuts and says they're racist. Your son, and they get detentions.
They didn't have to have the detention. The head of the year really apologised, said the teacher, if she's going to have a debate, she's got to be able to take other people's opinions.
So when you challenged the school took the detentions away and apologised?
Oh, yeah. Completely. He really apologised, the head of the year.
You can't have a conversation about a general election then when somebody wants to vote for one of the main parties. Well, one of the parties is, right, you've got a detention. That's absurd.
Well, I couldn't believe it. At the time, I thought, there's no way he's got a detention for that. But I said, I'll ring the school and find out. And
go on then, Dad, ring him. Go on, Dad, ring him. Ring him. It's true, Dad. Nice story, Paul. But how did the teacher? Did you say it was a she, the teacher?
It was a she, the teacher. Yeah. It was his form teacher. Yeah. I think she had to apologise to the boys and.
Right. Good.
Well, I've had stories like that. I've heard, and also, people at school and university, lecturers comparing me to, fascist leaders of the 1930s. I mean, just quite extraordinary. The sheer level of prejudice and bias that exists in much of our educational system really is very, very disturbing if you believe in free speech and open debate. I'm certainly very worried about it. Somebody else who's worried about it is Dan, who's calling from Bury St Edmunds. Good morning, Dan.
Hello, Nigel. How are you?
Very well. Now, you're 17, I understand.
I am indeed, yes.
So tell us what your crime is, please, Dan.
Well, my crime would be consistently, I suppose it could be argued to be disruptive in the sense all of my, I can think of maybe one or two teachers in my entire college who aren't liberal Europhiles. My crime is simply supporting the UKIP manifesto and the UKIP sort of ideology. Controlled immigration. Doing what's best for Britain, things like that. And I've got. It's obviously not as extreme as the gentleman who called Nick Ferrari, but my classmates, I'm called racist, Nazi. I'm not a Nazi by any means, but people use this sort of terminology just to try and just suppress.
But Dan, from the sounds of it, you stick to your guns.
I do indeed, yes. Well, it was very interesting. Yesterday, I went to a university open day, and I went to a politics talk, and it was you came up actually, and there was a room full of people, and I said, "Who here likes this man?" Pointing a picture at you. My hand shot straight up. There was no one else in the room. I'm not ashamed to speak my mind. And,
but isn't it incredible, Dan? Isn't it? I mean, that's a really interesting. I've heard all sorts of it, but that's a really interesting story. I mean, this is an Orwellian attempt to demonise somebody, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been banned from Facebook possibly 3 times now, just because people don't like what it is that I have to say. And to be honest, it's not even that bad in the sense, I think anything specifically in the education system, anything remotely right-wing is completely suppressed. So my teachers are actually very open. They don't mind engaging in the debate, but there's
at least that's good to hear. But do you feel, Dan, and they may disagree with you, the teachers, do you, and you may get called names by the other young people there, but is there at least a proper political debate going on within that college?
There is and there isn't. There is more of a what I find is the teachers sort of, I would even argue, indoctrinating, because there's a teacher that luckily doesn't teach me who says if you write about anything positive about Brexit in your exam, you will fail. And I don't really think that gives off the right message. Obviously, there's positives and there's negatives to Brexit.
Awful.
Yes.
This is awful.
And I wouldn't say anything bad about that person. It's just if I've always said if I can't have my opinion and write how I feel is the correct answer, or even not the correct answer, if I can't express myself, then why do you have the right to express yourself? So obviously not you personally, but anyone who criticises.
Dan, it's tough. You sound like a very brave young man, and well done for having the courage to stand up for what you believe in. You'll go far in life. Thank you. Do you know, I had one case where a chap contacted me, a couple of years back and he was called into the school at lunchtime. So left work, went to school, headmaster, and the police. The Hampshire Constabulary, this was. I won't narrow the geography any more than that. And basically, his 16-year-old son, the reason the police were there, had been looking at unsuitable material online in one of the common rooms at lunchtime on a school computer. So you can imagine the conclusion that the father drew. No, it wasn't that. He'd been looking at the UKIP website. And the headmaster had deemed this to be so extreme, they called the police. So these are levels of prejudice and bias, an attempt to shut down free speech, an attempt to demonise people. This is happening in academia. There's too much of it. Is it any wonder that we seem to have a lot of young people out there who don't respect the fact that other people have different points of view? And that, folks, is what democracy is. Crikey, it's what our forebears made massive sacrifices so that we could live freely under. Back to Mrs May, and partly back to, is there a need for UKIP or something new on the centre-right? Ben is a new caller from Hazelmere. Good morning, Ben.
Oh, good morning, Nigel.
So, is she doing the sensible thing? Is she going to be the sort of Tony Blair type figure who manages to grab the centre ground and a big majority next time round?
Absolutely not. I think the problem with Theresa May is that she doesn't know where she stands. If she wanted to find new voters, then, quite frankly, first of all, she could find conservatism, because she seems to have lost track of where that is. And secondly, you look at the Brexit argument and look at her language all the way through it. The only way she's going to attract any Labour voters is if she actually delivers on a proper Brexit that gives back sovereignty and control in the way that everybody's looking for.
Yeah, in particular, Ben, I would suggest control of the borders, because that was a massive issue in many of those Labour voting constituencies that voted Leave.
It was, and I also remember as well, I don't remember it, Nigel, but just before the general election, the Conservatives and her poll ratings were actually very positive, and going very much in the right direction, because it was in the early days of the Brexit vote.
Yep.
And the right kind of language was being talked about. And I remember actually listening to LBC at the time, to a number of the different radio shows, and a lot of people calling in saying, I'm normally a Labour voter, but I'm considering voting for the Conservatives this time to make sure that, we get the Brexit we want.
Yes.
She destroyed it with a silly manifesto.
Yeah, and also, I don't think Theresa May is the right person to appeal to that old Labour vote. I just don't think she's quite got what it takes. Ben, I thank you very much indeed for your call. Ian from the New Forest says if Boris, Davis or Rees-Mogg were PM, they would appeal to Labour leavers and win a general election by a country mile. Do you know what, Ian? One of those as leader, with a Canada-style deal and leaving political union and all the other interlinkages, would, in my opinion, I agree with you, win a general election by a country mile. And sticking with the UKIP theme, I voted UKIP in the previous election mainly to push for the Brexit vote. I wasn't the only one in my school, which I only very carefully, quietly, slowly realised after talking about it to other staff. I wasn't too keen to talk about this openly, says Ross, who was a teacher in Sussex. Yeah, Ross, that's right. Over the last few years, to have been a UKIP voter. And I remember sort of being out campaigning and people would sort of give me a wink or a tap on the arm and say, sort of almost like a ventriloquist, yeah, I support you, as if anyone that is seen to support a party that wants to control its borders and take back its sovereignty will be pilloried for wanting to do so. We really have moved a long way away, haven't we, from a proper, tolerant, open, functioning democracy. You're listening to a Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 11:45. Anybody on the right in British politics has a problem. And I say that at the same time as the Prime Minister, Theresa May, appears to be abandoning conservatism in the centre-right in her rush to the centre. Who is going to plug that gap? Will they be allowed to? Will they simply be shouted down? My next caller is Bevica, who's calling from Barnet. Good morning.
Hi, Nigel Farage. First of all, I'd really like to say I think you're one of my political heroes, and you've influenced me so much over the past few years.
Well, that's very kind of you. Am I allowed to ask how old you are?
I'm 15, turning 16 soon.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So, you clearly follow politics and current affairs.
Yeah, very much.
And we've had callers on saying that if they express conservative centre-right opinions, they get a tough time at school. What's your experience of this?
Well, in quite a few of my classes, lots of teachers have come out saying, for like the usual, Trump being a racist and a bigot and like all the usual insults. And I'm very used to that, obviously, because it's quite the norm now. And they've also come out and said, oh, don't vote for UKIP, or don't even try to associate with UKIP because they're the far-right, racist group, white nationalism. They've said that quite a few times. And I don't think they realise that I'm actually from an ethnic minority. Yeah. And I very much support the values that UKIP stands for. And to them, they just can't understand that. Like,
it's funny, Bevica. It's funny going around the country as I did, when I was UKIP leader for a decade, and as we became more successful, that's when the protests started. And the only people that ever screamed racist at me were never members of the ethnic minorities. It was upper middle class white people with not much else to do with their lives, you know. So, Bevica, tell me something. You sit there and go through. Do you speak up on this, or do you feel you sort of need to keep quiet?
Well, no, the last time I did speak up, I lost all of my friends who were very, very angry at the fact that I came out and said that I liked Trump and that I thought Brexit was a good idea. I lost all of my friends at that point, so I'm very hesitant to
I have to say, I can't say I blame you. Yeah. Well, it is ludicrous that we're living in a world that treats a 15-year-old who states her opinion like that. Thank you thank you so much for the call. Keep listening to LBC and call us again, Bevica. Please do. Thank you. Yeah, it's just tough, isn't it? And then you got the previous caller saying he's been to university for an open day. And all the students, they showed a picture of me and they're all supposed to scream at it. Well, someone, read 1984. Read about what sort of group hate does to the human condition. It's not clever stuff. Now, my next caller is a Conservative commentator, Ali Miraj. Good morning, Ali.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I'm well, but we must just disclose to the listeners that we know each other. And you've never been a UKIP member, but you are a Conservative thinker and writer.
That's right, Nigel. And I was just munching my Weetabix when I heard the programme, and I thought this whole thing about freedom of speech, it's something that's close to my heart.
Yes.
And I wrote an article for City AM the other day, launching the nominations for the next year's Contrarian Prize, which is this prize I set up for people who go against the grain and stand up. You've been nominated for it before.
I know.
And I wrote an article for City AM, Nigel, and the thrust of the article was that you cannot have an open discussion, a mature discussion about immigration and asylum policies within Europe at the moment, because every time you do, you just get closed down and are branded as a violator of human rights. And my point was that if we don't have this discussion, the Liberal elite then scratches its head and wonders why the Sweden Democrats have gone up from 2.9% in 2006, the share of the vote, to 17.5%. And this is the level of debate that we're just saying, how do we have an open discussion when everyone's going to be branded a racist? I posted this article on my Facebook. It was in City AM, my piece, and it got taken down by Facebook immediately.
What?
Nigel, for breaching community guidelines. I couldn't believe it. Published in a national newspaper, the title being "Stop Seeking Refuge in Moral Indignation, Listen to Those Who Dare to Disagree," taken down by Facebook.
Have any other commentators or journalists picked up on this?
I don't know. I mean, I told the guys at City AM, it's a very reputable publication, as
Absolutely.
you know, and they give a platform, as LBC do, to people with different views. And if anyone reads the piece, I thought it was a very balanced piece. I mean, I'm not in any way. All I'm saying is that we need to have an open discussion in a mature manner, because people are not just worried about the economic impact. There's also social and cultural elements as well, which just get poo-pooed all the time. And anyone who dares to raise these issues is branded as racist, which is really...
And do they call you, Ali?
Lazy.
Do they call you racist as well?
Well, to be honest...
It's a bit more difficult with you, isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't, But the thing is, I often find that people on the left, when I was standing for Parliament in 2005 in Watford, and Michael
For the
Howard
Conservatives.
ran that campaign. Yeah, for all the Conservatives.
Yeah.
And then Michael Howard ran the campaign, it's not racist to talk about immigration.
Yeah.
I was vilified. Oh, you're standing on a racist ticket. You're doing dog whistle politics. You just can't have a debate, Nigel.
No, Ali, really interesting. Thank you. For leaving the breakfast bowl and sharing that with us. And, well, I tell you what, I'm going to pick up that issue, because if Facebook took that down, there's something... And I've been talking about this issue. Ali, thank you for the call. Folks, I've been talking about this now for months. I did a lecture on it 3 weeks ago in London. I'm really worried that the power now that we have in the hands of the few firms that run social media, they are now beginning... They are now beginning, quite seriously, to discriminate against people with conservative views. It is very, very worrying. Sean is my next caller from Horsham. Good morning, Sean.
Hi, Nigel.
When you listen, Sean, when you listen to 15-year-olds ringing the programme, 17-year-olds ringing the programme, explaining how, because of their opinions, they're being treated in this way at school, do you wonder what's happening in this country?
Going back to the points about school and perhaps school teachers, for 3 years, school teachers have been protesting against cuts, and they've been ignored. They're still not listening. I think obviously there is going to be that sort of atmosphere at schools where they're going to be railing against the Conservatives. This conversation on the radio seems to have turned about UKIP and the right and immigration, when really we were asking a question about Theresa May and have they moved...
I was. Sean, I was. And we had debated that for an hour and a half. And the reason I slightly changed gear is that I wonder, with May occupying the centre ground, if anything tries to set up on the right, is it just going to be shouted down, and will it get a fair listening to?
I'd like to challenge that point that she's moved anywhere to the left. Maybe a tiny bit on Brexit, but to be honest, on everything else, there is no shift whatsoever. We still... I listened to LBC a little bit, and Andrew Pierce the other night had police officers on talking about having to be ambulances, coping with mental health issues, covering for youth clubs. All the cuts all interlink and create a problem that is not being solved by the so-called centre.
All right. But she does say, Sean, she does say that austerity is coming to an end, so that must please you to hear that.
2015, Cameron said the same. In the same conference this year, Hammond said there will be more cuts. Now interestingly, in the USA, student debt unpaid is now £1.5 trillion. Right now, there is a debt crisis, and the big policy announcement last week was let councils borrow against assets.
And therefore, Sean, get into more debt. Sean, you are wholly unconvinced. I thank you for your call. Sean doesn't think May's pitch is going to work. Russell on Facebook says centre-right politics is not just about freedom of speech. It's a political movement that the left is desperately trying to shut down by killing right-wing debate and silencing centre-right views. Sadly, there's too much of it. I'll be back tomorrow evening at 6. At 3 this afternoon, it's Ian Payne. But up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thanks, Nigel.